Welcome to the channel for the future caretakers of resurrected species. Welcome to the Paleo-Zoo-Keepers Association.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to Paleo-Zoo-Keeper Association. My name is Austin. I think it's pretty obvious that I'm a fan of Jurassic Park. It's one of the things that inspired this channel. And even though I know some people have mixed reactions to it, I also like the Jurassic World as well. And while a lot of people would complain about the movies, the animated shows, they do help out. And I'm talking about both Camp Cretaceous anime series and its sequel series, Chaos Theory. Basically takes place before Jurassic World Dominion. It definitely is a good show. It took a darker tone, and I like that. But this is not a review on that series. One thing that really got my interest in the series is that Bumpy, an Ankylosaurus character, actually suffered from a medical condition called egg binding or egg bound. And yeah, it got me thinking, what would egg binding on a real Ankylosaurus would be like? Obviously, this sort of thing would interest someone like me, and that's the nature of this video. Basically, before we get really started, let's talk about the Ankylosaurus, shall we?
For those who don't know, Ankylosaurus magniventris is an armored ornithischian or bird-hipped dinosaur that lived in North America, said to have lived there between 68 to 66 million years ago in the late Cretaceous period. At a length of between 20 to 33 feet long, having a hip height of over 5.5 feet tall, and weighing in between 4 to 7.5 tons, it was the largest known species of ankylosaur that had ever lived. Like most, if not all, bird-hipped dinosaurs, the Ankylosaurus is said to be primarily a herbivore. More details on its diet we'll get to later in the video, but we'll basically go on the fact that it's mostly a herbivore. As mentioned earlier, and as one can obviously see, the Ankylosaurus has a heavily armored body to defend itself against predators. Even its eyelids have a bony plate to protect its eyes from attack. At the end of its tail is a club-like structure that it could be able to swing very strongly through a lateral arc of 100 degrees, and was strong enough to be able to shatter the leg bones of a T-Rex or basically turn our bones into gravel. It was most likely used as defense against predators and even for fighting other members of its kind for mates and resources.
Just like birds, reptiles, and other dinosaurs, most likely Ankylosaurus laid eggs too. Now, I currently don't know like how big the eggs, how big the clutch, and all that. If you do have that information, please mention it in the comment section. Definitely love to learn more about that. But anyway, regardless, since they are able to lay eggs, they will also suffer some reproductive problems that modern birds and reptiles would suffer with as well. One of them would be egg binding, a pretty fatal condition if not treated. What is egg binding, you may ask? Well, let's get started on the explanation.
Egg binding, also known as dystocia or being egg-bound, is a life-threatening condition that when birds and reptiles cannot be able to pass their eggs through the reproductive tract or their cloaca.
Mind you, the cloaca is not just the reproductive tract, but it also includes the digestive and urinary tract, which means that if the cloaca is plugged up, then the animal could not urinate or defecate, and that would lead to an immense amount of medical complications that can and are life-threatening. The most common cause of egg binding is hypocalcemia, or the lack of sufficient calcium in the animal's diet. It is immensely important that the animal has a calcium-rich diet because it helps the formation of a healthy egg and muscle contractions for the reptile or bird to lay it. However, it can also be caused by a lack of vitamin D, which impairs the body's calcium absorption. This can normally be done with exposure to sunlight. But in cases where exposure to sunlight is limited, either for medical or climate-related reasons, you will need either add vitamin D supplements into the animal's diet or install large UV lights in their indoor enclosures. And speaking of diet, let's touch in on what to feed the Ankylosaurus to prevent egg binding. Ankylosaurus, given its robust armored body and wide muzzle, it was most likely a non-selective low browser. Along with that, bone structures in the skull shows that it has a long tongue to get food like cattle and giraffes, which would have assisted it as it browsed. Also, based on the retracted position of the nostrils similar to digging reptiles, it shows that Ankylosaurus, while not a burrowing animal itself, would have displayed earth-moving behavior similar to pigs and bears. This would mean that it would have also dug for roots, tubers, and even invertebrates and maybe small animals. This would make the Ankylosaurus an omnivore as well, with the inclusion of animal protein. When the Ankylosaurus was alive, there were a large amount of plants that it would have consumed. This mostly consisted of ferns, cycads, conifers, low-growing angiosperms, and horsetails. For a large herbivore like Ankylosaurus, calcium intake would have been critical for maintaining its massive, armor-plated body. Although we cannot know for certain what exact plants Ankylosaurus ate, there are a few prehistoric plants with higher calcium content that may have been part of its diet. Ferns were common in the Cretaceous period. These would have been a significant part of the Ankylosaurus diet. Certain species of ferns can contain moderate levels of calcium, which would be beneficial for maintaining bone and shell health. Horsetails are a group of primitive plants that were abundant in prehistoric times and may have made up part of Ankylosaurus' diet. Although primarily rich in silica, some horsetails may have contributed trace amounts of calcium to the diet. Angiosperms, or flowering plants, were becoming more common by the late Cretaceous. Ankylosaurus likely grazed or browsed on some early forms of flowering shrubs and herbs. As flowering plants began to diversify, some of them likely contained calcium depending on their biological composition. Modern equivalents, like legumes, tend to be rich in calcium. One such legume, alfalfa, is commonly used as feed for modern animals and can be used for Ankylosaurus. Of course, be careful with it so that you don't accidentally have the animal become bloated. With the Ankylosaurus being an earth mover as well as a browser, the dinosaur would have gone for roots and tubers, as well as invertebrates. While we don't exactly know what type of roots and tubers the dinosaur was fond of, there are tuber plants today that could provide calcium in the Ankylosaurus diet. Turnips are one tuber crop that has a good source of calcium. A cup of mashed turnips contains 76 milligrams of calcium, which is about as much as half a slice of cheddar cheese. Turnips also contain potassium, magnesium, and phytonutrients. Taro is a root vegetable that both the root and leaf is a good source of calcium, along with several other important nutrients such as vitamin C, vitamin A, iron, and folate, as well as disease-fighting antioxidants. Several other root vegetables like yams and wild types of potatoes do have considerable amounts of calcium. However, a great amount of root vegetables, such as the commonly cultivated types of potatoes, have very low levels of calcium. So, this would definitely be something to consider when feeding the Ankylosaurus and making certain that calcium levels are met so that several calcium deficient illnesses, especially egg binding, are avoided.
One way you could be able to add calcium to the Ankylosaurus diet is either add in like a calcium powder to its feed, crushed oyster shells, or make large calcium blocks like you would do for turtles, so that both A, they can supplement their diet with calcium, and B, can be able to help trim their beaks that they don't overgrow. So there's definitely a lot of ways you can add on calcium to help prevent egg binding, or at least one of the causes of it.
Okay, sorry I got a little carried away with that one. Let's get back to the other causes of egg binding.
Another cause of egg binding is dehydration. So basically, it's because that if the animal is not hydrated, the egg that's not being laid yet, the shell will become hard and brittle to the point that it will break. within the animal, and of course that will cause an internal injury and other complications. So, the solution, easiest, it's easy. Make sure the animal is hydrated with clean water.
Another cause of egg binding is deformities with the eggs themselves. Of course, sometimes you may end up having a healthy dinosaur and they still may get egg binding. It's not uncommon for birds and reptiles to develop misshapen or deformed eggs, but these egg deformities could be caused by either nutrient deficiency or dehydration or both. While not common, it isn't entirely impossible for a pathogenic infection or even internal tumors or cysts to cause egg binding by inflammation or obstruction of the reproductive tract. Tumors and cysts may require surgery, or if it's just a general infection, antibiotics or antivirals may be needed.
Another cause for egg binding would be lack of exercise, like basically the muscles are weak or the reproductive tract is in atrophy. So basically, to help remedy this or help prevent this is allow the animals to be able to get exercise, get them to be able to move around, stuff like that. Just make sure they are able to get all the exercise they need.
One cause of egg binding would be that the animals themselves are either laying eggs for the first time or that they're animals of advanced age, basically very young or very old. Sometimes these are basically the old ones, their muscles are not as strong as they used to. Young ones, they're inexperienced. Now, these things can, in this case, can resolve by himself naturally. However, it's always advisable to have a medical option up.
Another reason for egg binding is not so much so on the animal itself, whether medically or nutritionally, but it also could be environmentally. For example, basically, if the animal was in an environment where there's no place to lay eggs, there's no material or anything like that, the animal might actually try to retain the eggs, hold the eggs until they get into a better environment. And this is just a fan theory, but maybe that's the reason why Bumpy from Jurassic World Chaos Theory, maybe that's why she became egg-bound, because in the show she was in a barren shipping container. There was not exactly a lot of materials to make a nest, or it's basically a stressful situation. Also, it's not like the environment is not just uncomfortable, but it's also stressful. There's a lot of stress going on that can make an animal retain the eggs, making them egg-bound. So, fan theory, that's probably what happened with Bumpy. And in real life, that can probably happen to an Ankylosaurus as well.
When noticing or looking out for egg binding, there are several symptoms that are associated with this condition that one needs to be on the lookout for. One symptom, at least for Ankylosaurus, would be lethargy. Basically like a lack of energy or enthusiasm. In the case of birds, it'll basically be that they don't fly off. And then again, lethargy would be the same for flightless birds, as well as dinosaurs. Another one would be straining or a lot of discomfort. Basically because they're straining trying to get the egg out. Along with straining, there would be uncharacteristic sitting or squatting, like mentioned earlier, a desire or trying to be able to lay the egg, but the egg's not coming out. Another symptom would be to have the tail pump up and down, basically as a way to get their hips moving. Ironically enough, this is a symptom that Bumpy from the Jurassic World Chaos Theory has displayed. So, kudos on the creators on that.
Other symptoms would include a lack of appetite, just not wanting to eat. Another is a swollen abdominal area, at least more swollen than usual. Another would be labored breathing or difficulty breathing. And in extreme cases, paralyzing of the legs. because when the egg gets out and having difficulty, it can go straying on the nerves in the legs. This sort of thing can actually happen with cattle too, when they have calves that are too big to move through the vulva. So, similar thing for Ankylosaurus as well.
Now that we have an understanding of the causes and the symptoms of egg binding, let's treat this Ankylosaur for egg binding. Like mentioned earlier in the video, a calcium-deficient diet and dehydration are some of the more common causes for egg binding. So, when treating the animal, administering IV fluids and calcium injections would definitely be a must when treating the animal. All this should be able to help the Ankylosaur be able to have muscle contractions that would assist it in laying the egg.
One treatment that can definitely help pass the egg along that has been done with reptiles and birds is to give them a nice warm bath with a lot of Epsom salt poured into there. It should help be able to make it easier to lay eggs. Now, this is actually where we get to interesting ordeal or obstacle, if you will, on this. While that definitely works for like reptiles and birds, and for the most part they're generally a small size or manageable size, Ankylosaurus is a whole different story. Got a big, powerful reptile, and especially one that weighs as much as an elephant. This is definitely going to be a challenge. So this is definitely going to need some good engineering and some construction and innovation to be able to, especially like pre-plan for this in order to be able to be ready for this. Now, for this, we would definitely need a construction of a large therapeutic bath, similar to what's been made for horses, only obviously a lot bigger, and can also deal with the Ankylosaurus' clubbed tail in case it ever decides to thrash around. And we also make certain that it could be able to be filled up with warm water fastly and efficiently, but also we could be able to keep an eye on the temperature, and also make sure it's able to drain efficiently as well. So this is definitely a type of piece of technology that needs to be developed beforehand, at least before you get your first Ankylosaur. Now, once you got the Ankylosaurus in the bath, and after a while, one other thing you'll need to do is, after that, is be able to lubricate and manually remove, as efficient but as gentle as you can, the egg from the cloaca. Now, obviously, this is going to be a challenge because, like mentioned before, Ankylosaurus, big as an elephant, is very low slung to the ground, and has a tail that can reduce your whole skeleton into splinters or powder. So it's going to be tricky, and it'll take a lot of some technology and innovation to be able to do this safely. Now, this is definitely a unique challenge because when we're dealing with the largest animals today, they're mostly basically like the mammals, from like horses to elephants. They usually have, despite the differences, they have one thing in common. They have tails, but their tails are not exactly deadly. And also, for a funny way of saying it, their bums are flat. So it's easier to be able to deal with that. However, the Ankylosaurus, this is not so much. So, thankfully, there are at least two technologies, or at least one technology and one innovation, that I think can definitely help deal with the Ankylosaurus in that manner, safely and efficiently. And funnily enough, this is going to make you think you've gone to a mechanic shop rather than a veterinary procedure.
One technology that could probably help is a lift. Basically the same kind of car lift you see in mechanic shops. With the animal being sedated, at least sedated enough so that they won't thrash around, but they can still be standing. Make sure you're able to lead it to the lift, and then have the lift up the ankylosaur, and have the tail restrained. That way, the veterinarian could be able to lubricate and manually be able to remove the egg out of the cloaca, or multiple eggs even.
Yeah, this technology can definitely help, although it's not without its challenges, like you gotta make sure the animal is sedated enough, you gotta make sure the lift is strong enough to be able to lift an animal this weight. I mean, there are lifts that could be able to lift up the ankylosaur of that weight, but they're not cheap, and it'll take some more innovations and ideas to make it all work. Thankfully, however, the other idea, or in this case innovation, that might be able to help out. Of course, you'll need some pre-planning and construction before you get your first ankylosaur or start breeding your ankylosaurs. And it'll probably need some research, but another innovation, also from a mechanic shop, I think could definitely help out in this regard.
And that would be a car pit or service pit. It is basically a pit in the ground where the mechanic could be able to get down under the car safely and is able to stand as they are working under the vehicle. I think that something like this could be done for Ankylosaurus, at least when getting up to the cloaca to get the egg. Obviously, there'll be some modifications, like some removable bars or plates when the animal's walking on it, and when the animal's standing on it and on over the pit, the plate could be removed, and the veterinarian could be able to do his job. And this sort of thing can also be used for other procedures like artificial insemination and so forth. In extreme cases, however, surgery will need to be done, especially like in the case of reptiles. A cesarean section or C-section of surgery will need to be done. So, with egg binding, prevention is often the best thing you need to do. Make sure that the animal has all the nutrition it needs, especially has a calcium-rich diet, which should be a given since it needs calcium-rich diet for all its armor. Make sure it's properly hydrated, and make sure it's getting plenty of exercise, and definitely keep it a close eye. Doing all this is a great way to minimize the chances of egg binding, but nature has a way of humbling us and throwing us a curveball, so while definitely practice prevention, but being ready is also a must as well. So if we do all this, we can be able to provide Ankylosaurus the best welfare possible when it comes to egg binding. If you have made it this far, thank you ever so kindly for watching this video. The topic of this video was definitely fascinating to look up on, especially in the initial stages when I first thought of this concept after watching the first season of Jurassic World Chaos Theory, when the Ankylosaurus character Bumpy suffered from the same condition, and I wondered of what it would be like in a real life scenario. So definitely kudos to the creators for getting some of that right, some of it is spot on. I want to say a special thanks to Keenan Taylor. His commission illustrations really help out with my video. If you want to learn more about him and support him, I will send a link to both his DeviantArt and YouTube channel down below. I also want to give thanks to CasuariusCasuarius, YouTube's official cassowary. He was able to help me out with research for this topic. It definitely helps that he actually experienced egg binding with his own pet reptile, a smooth-snouted Cayman. So definitely, thank you ever so kindly for that, my friend. I also want to thank the patrons on my Patreon page. Every little bit helps, and if you want to be able to become a paid member of Patreon, I'll send a link to my Patreon page down below. Also want to thank to my subscribers. You definitely help out in so many ways. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and so you can be able to see more videos like this. I also want to thank viewers like you. Thank you. Your views help this channel out in many ways. I hope that each and every one of you has a grand day. Adios!